Hey everybody, it's summertime, and this is the time of year when I typically put out a list of book recommendations for the summer. Usually it's the best books that I've read this year, and I want to suggest them to my students, to my friends who have middle school, high school age kids. It's something that I like to do because I want people reading good books. This year, this week especially, I want to do something different for this summer. And I've talked before about one of the big differences with young adult literature today compared to when I was young is that not only is there a much greater quality of literature for kids to read today, but these authors are tackling serious issues. And I really believe that the best way for middle school age kids, even high school age kids, to understand and begin to think about important issues that are impacting their world, their lives, is through good literature. It's a good way to start a conversation about it. It's easier for kids to understand this than it is for them to understand something that they're seeing in the news oftentimes. And so with what's been going on the last couple of weeks, with the killing of George Floyd, with the protests that have been going on for the past 2 weeks now, I thought that it would be good to select some books that would help students navigate this. And so I've got several really, really good choices. And I've got them kind of arranged by age level. The first one is this one right here, Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes. And this is certainly appropriate for middle school, and high school kids would like it too, but it's appropriate for middle school. Even if you've got elementary school, students would be fine with this, as long as they're fine with the serious issues being discussed. It's about a 12-year-old boy named Jerome, and in the opening pages, he's killed by he's a black boy. He's killed by a white police officer, and what's interesting about this book is there's kind of a dual narrative, and the first one begins from that moment, from Jerome's death, and it extends as he's kind of living as a ghost boys. He's living as a ghost, watching the repercussions of this, not only for his family, but what's really interesting, the only living person who can see him and interact with him is the young daughter of the police officer who killed him. And so it allows us to see how Jerome's family is impacted and how the police officer's family is impacted, and how that young girl has to really struggle with this, which is really, I think, really powerful. And the second narrative lets us get to know Jerome. It leads up to his death, and so it kind of alternates chapters. It's a really fascinating book, and it's a really interesting way to look at the two sides of police violence. Ghost Boys, Jewel Parker Rhodes, really good book. The next one that I've got, this one I read 2 years ago, and it was maybe I think from 2019, it was maybe my favorite book that I read in 2019. Dear Martin, written by Nick Stone, and it's about a boy named Justice, and it's called Dear Martin because he's kind of writing in a journal, and when he writes in his journal, he's writing to Martin Luther King. And so Justice, early in the book, is trying to help a friend. It's late at night, and a police officer comes up, and Justice is doing nothing wrong. He ends up being put in handcuffs, and it's about that. The police officer, assuming because he's a young black boy wearing a hoodie at night, he gets treated this way. And one of the things that's interesting too is that he goes to a private school, and he's one of the few black kids at this school, and so he's navigating those issues as well. It's a really, really powerful story. I would say this is mature middle school, certainly high school, mature middle school, but it's a really good book. There's some profanity in here, fair amount of profanity, but look, there's some important issues discussed too. The next one, this is rapidly becoming like the gold standard in young adult literature, but if you're discussing this issue, if you're creating a syllabus to deal with police brutality, this is on it. The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. And it was a movie. You could watch the movie, I suppose, but you need to read the book, because this main character, Star, is watching Star figure out what's going on in her world and find her voice as a leader in the movement is really powerful stuff. And in the opening pages, she watches as a friend of hers is taken out of the car by a police officer, and he ends up being shot. And it's how she deals with that moment, but also deals with everything else, how her friends perceive her, how her parents see her, how her parents deal with the fact that she's a black girl, but she has a white boyfriend. There's a lot of stuff in this novel, and it's phenomenal. This is a must read. It's mature. There's some profanity going on in here. There is some discussion about sexuality, but it's nothing that should scare anybody off. This is important. It's too important to miss that. So those are the 3 books that I've read. I want to share 2 books that are on my reading list for this summer. I have not read these books, and usually I would never recommend a book that I haven't read, but I've got faith that I can do that. And this first one, All American Boys by Jason Reynolds. The reason I recommend this, the reason I'm comfortable recommending this, is because I think I've read 5 of Jason Reynolds' books. He is one of my favorite authors, and this again has to do with white police officers and black boys, and that the problems that sometimes arise. And so this would be another really good one. My guess, based on my experience with Jason Reynolds, this would be mature middle school, high school. But All American Boys, I'm going to be reading this summer, and I'll come back and let you know what I think about it. If you read this, please reach out to me and let me know what you think about it. Next is another book that I've been meaning to read for a really long time, and it leapt to the top of my list for this summer for obvious reasons. And I'm really excited about this one, Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This is another one that was made into a movie recently, and it's available pretty much everywhere for free now during this time. But Just Mercy it deals with the problem of the fact that black men in America, a young black boy in America today, is more likely to go to prison than he is to go to college. And let's think about that statistic for a second. More likely to go to prison than he is to graduate from college. And part of that, there are a lot of reasons going in there, but this deals with a lot of the inequity that goes along with incarceration in America today. Now, this is the book that I'm going to be reading. This is the original version, but here there is an adaptation. I've got this in my classroom, a young adult version. And so, for instance, if there are parents out there who want to start a conversation about this, it would be a really cool thing for parents to pick up this version and read this, and your middle school kid could read this version. This is the young adult version of Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. But I for sure am going to be reading this book this summer. So there you go. I think that those books you could read all those books, I think. And it would be a really good way for a young black kid to see herself in the pages of a book. That's always an important thing. It would also be a good way for kids who are not black to be able to read something and understand a little bit of what's going on. And I think that's a really important thing. The best thing we can do during these times is to strive to understand each other, and reading good literature is a huge step in that direction. So there you go. Ghost Boys by Jewel Parker Rhodes, Dear Martin by Nick Stone, The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley, Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. Those are the titles for this summer. Go get them.